They say life's a roller coaster, but man, I didn't sign up for this one. It all started back when I was 42. Met this woman, vibrant, full of life, but with demons of her own. Addiction, it's a beast. We had our share of ups and downs, kind of like a dance, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I remember this one time early on, we were at this cozy little dive bar, the kind with dim lights and a jukebox stuck in the 80s. She was all smiles, laughter echoing over the clink of glasses. But as the night wore on, her eyes got that glazed look, and I knew we were in for trouble. That was the first time I saw the addiction take hold. It was like watching a storm cloud cover the sun. Cheating, yeah, that happened. Stumbled upon her once at a friend's party. Upstairs, not alone. Man, that stun. I walked out, heart in my throat, feeling like the world's biggest fool. But when she came after me, all tears and apologies, I caved. Love does that to you, makes you see past the hurt. Getting her into rehab was a journey in itself. Convincing her, dealing with the fallout, it was messy. But when she got out, it was like the woman I met came back to life. We had this beautiful moment on the beach one evening, just after her rehab. She told me, with the sunset painting the sky, that she wanted to start fresh. I believed her, we believed in us. Our wedding, picture perfect, her in white, me in a suit that I swear was trying to choke me. Our families were there, her mom crying, my dad patting me on the back so hard I thought I'd fall over. We danced under the stars, and for that moment, all the past troubles seemed like a distant memory. Everyone kept saying how we were meant to be, a perfect match. I guess we bought into that fairy tale. The honeymoon phase was something else. We did those couple things, brunch on Sundays, movie nights on Fridays. I got used to her being there, her toothbrush next to mine, her perfume lingering in the bathroom. We'd argue over silly things, who left the milk out, why the toilet seat was up, the usual married life quirks. But as the days turned into months, I started noticing the little signs. A missed call here, an unexplained absence there. I brushed it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. But deep down I knew something was off. It's like when you know a storm's coming, you can feel it in the air, but you hope you're wrong. Looking back, I guess our foundation was always a bit shaky, built on hope and a whole lot of ignoring the obvious. But I loved her, man. I really did, and I thought that would be enough. Turns out, love's not a cure-all. It's more like a band-aid on a bullet wound, helps for a bit, but eventually you're going to have to deal with the damage. So there we were, setting up our little home, pictures on the wall, plants in the window. But beneath it all, there were cracks, and no amount of plaster could cover them up. I just didn't want to see them, Love makes you optimistic, or maybe just blind. But hey, that's just the start of the story. There's more to it, a lot more. Buckle up, because this ride's just getting started. That first year of tying the knot? Pure bliss, like something out of a cheesy romance flick. We were those lovebirds you'd see in the park, annoyingly cute and all wrapped up in each other. I'd wake up to her singing in the kitchen, off-key but beautiful in a way that only your better half can be. And she'd laugh at my terrible attempts at making breakfast in bed, scrambled eggs that were more like a culinary crime scene. Weekends were our little adventures. We'd hop into the car, no destination in mind, just driving until we found something interesting. Could be a small town fair, a hidden hiking trail, or a beach that wasn't on any map. It was like we were rediscovering the world together. She'd take a million photos, each one with that radiant smile of hers that could light up the darkest of places. Evenings were about Netflix and takeout, arguing over what to watch, ending up watching something neither of us really liked. But it didn't matter because it was about being together. We'd fall asleep on the couch, her head on my chest, the TV still murmuring in the background. Our friends would say we were goals. We'd host these little dinner parties that somehow always turned into impromptu dance-offs. She was a terrible dancer, but man, did she have spirit. Watching her groove with that awkward yet endearing rhythm was one of my favorite sights. But as we cruised into the second year, things started shifting, subtle at first. We'd bicker over small stuff while the dishes were piling up, whose turn it was to take out the trash, the usual cohabitation grites. At first, it was just the ebb and flow of marriage, like adjusting to a new rhythm. But it felt like we were slowly moving out of sync. Work stress didn't help. I was grinding away at my job, trying to earn a decent living, while she was figuring out her own career path. Our conversation started shifting from dreams and aspirations to bills and responsibilities. The weight of reality was creeping into our little bubble. We stopped going on our random weekend trips. Saturdays became about grocery shopping and catching up on household chores. Sundays were for lounging, but more like coexisting in the same space rather than enjoying each other's company. We were still in love, but it was like we were forgetting how to show it. And then there were the silences. Those moments when you realize you're not talking because you're comfortable, but because you're out of things to say. We'd sit at dinner, chatting about mundane stuff, but the laughter and deep conversations of the past were becoming rare gems. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't all doom and gloom. We had our moments of spontaneous romance, like when she surprised me with tickets to my favorite band, or when I planned a candlelit dinner at home. But these moments were flickers of light in what was slowly becoming a routine existence. As year 2 dawned, I started wondering if this was what married life was supposed to be. Just a cycle of good times and not so good times, a test of patience and love. I guess I was naive thinking love was all about the highs. I was learning that it also meant navigating the lows together. So there we were, stepping into another year of our journey, not quite the same starry-eyed couple, but holding on, believing we could find our way back to those carefree days. Little did I know, the real challenges were just around the corner. Year 3, that's when our marriage train hit the wall. She slipped back into her old ways, the bottle becoming her secret companion again. It wasn't just a sip here and there, it was full-blown nights of oblivion. I'd find empty bottles tucked away in the weirdest places, behind the couch, in the laundry basket, even in the trunk of her car. The night she cheated, man, that was a gut punch like no other. I came home late from work, the house was quiet, too quiet. Then I saw them, her and a so-called friend of mine, tangled up on our very own living room couch. The air got sucked right out of my lungs. I remember just standing there, frozen, while my whole world crumbled. Confronting her was a mix of rage, disbelief, and a weird sense of pity. She was remorseful, or at least she seemed to be. Her eyes, once full of life, were now just hollow. She blamed the alcohol, said she didn't remember much. I wanted to scream, to rage, but what was the point? The damage was done. I laid down the law, no more alcohol. It was that or I was out. She agreed, tearfully promised it was her last slip. We even started going to couples therapy, sitting in the sterile room with a guy who nodded a lot and offered cliché advice. But hey, we were trying, right? Things did get better for a bit. She threw herself into painting, her old passion. The house started filling up with canvases, splashes of color that seemed to scream all the things she couldn't say out loud. We'd spend evenings just talking about her art, and it felt like we were reconnecting. But the underlying issues, they were still there, simmering. Trust, once broken, isn't easily mended. I'd lie awake at night, listening to her breathing, wondering if she was really asleep or just pretending like me. Work became my escape. I'd stay late, take on extra projects, anything to avoid going home to face the uncertainty. Our social life took a nosedive too. Friends stopped coming around, invitations dried up. It was like we had this big sign on our front door saying dysfunctional couple, approach with caution. I missed the laughter, the carefree banter, but who wants to hang around a sinking ship? And then there were the whispers. People talking behind your back, pitying glances, the whole 9 yards. Walking into a room felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone knew your lines except you. The year trudged on, each day a carbon copy of the last. We were two strangers living under the same roof, going through the motions of a life we once dreamt up. That spark, that crazy beautiful connection we had, it was fading, and I didn't know how to reignite it. So, there we were at the end of year 3, standing at a crossroads. One path led to giving up, walking away from the wreckage. The other, a steep, rocky climb towards something that resembled healing. The question was, did we have the strength to take that climb? Or had we already fallen too far? Working in the same office with her, you'd think it'd be a dream, right? Seeing your better half every day, coffee breaks together, but nah, it was more like a nightmare in disguise. Gossip spreads like wildfire in close quarters, and soon enough, whispers about her started doing the rounds. It started off as vague murmurs, nothing concrete. Hushed tones in the break room, abruptly stopping when I walked in. You know the feeling, like you've just missed the punchline of a joke everyone else is in on. Then came the not-so-subtle glances, the pitying looks. It's the stuff paranoia is made of. I confronted her, of course. We'd be in our little home, a place that once felt like a sanctuary, now more like a stage for our nightly arguments. She'd deny everything, her voice rising, eyes welling up with frustration or maybe guilt. Hard to tell. I wanted to believe her. God knows I did. But it's tough when your gut and your heart are playing tug of war. One particularly rough evening, it all came to a head. We were sitting at the dinner table, the silence between us louder than any argument. I just blurted it out, asked her point blank if the rumors were true. She slammed her fork down, said I was being paranoid, unreasonable. That was when every sign pointed to something being off. The drive to work became my daily dose of dread. Stepping into the office felt like entering a minefield, never knowing when the next rumor would explode. I'd catch snippets of conversations, her name, mixed with laughter or scorn, and each time it was like a knife twisting in my gut. Then there was this one colleague, let's call him Mark, he'd been a good friend, or so I thought, started acting weird around me, avoiding eye contact, making excuses to leave when I showed up. One day I cornered him, asked him straight up if he knew anything. He just mumbled some nonsense and hurried off. But the look in his eyes, it said enough. Our home life became a series of cold interactions, like two roommates who couldn't stand each other. We'd sit in front of the TV, not speaking, barely acknowledging one another. Sometimes I'd catch her staring into space, lost in thought, and I'd wonder where her mind was wandering off to. Sleepless nights became my new norm. I'd lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every rumor, every argument, trying to piece together the puzzle. Was she really cheating? Or was I losing my mind? The uncertainty was a constant weight, pressing down on everything. Despite it all, there were these fleeting moments when the woman I fell in love with would reappear. A shared joke, a brief smile, a reminder of what we used to have. It was those moments that kept me hanging on, hoping against hope that we could get back to that place. But as the rumors kept swirling, my doubts grew. It was like living in a fog, every step uncertain, every word second-guessed. I wanted to shake her, to scream for the truth, but what good would that do? If she was lying, would she suddenly confess just because I raised my voice? So there I was, stuck between wanting to trust the woman I loved and feeling like a fool for even considering it. Rumors and doubts, man, they're a toxic mix. They seep into your bones, poison everything, till you don't know what to believe anymore. That Friday started like any other. I left for work with a peck on her cheek, the usual "have a good day" thrown over my shoulder. But man, I had no idea what was waiting for me at home. It was around noon when my boss told me I could leave early. "Take some time, you've been working hard," he said. I remember feeling grateful for the unexpected break. Thought maybe I'd surprise her. Maybe we could grab lunch or something. Little did I know. Pulling into our driveway, the first thing I noticed was this unfamiliar truck parked there. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it's just a friend, I told myself, trying to push down the rising tide of panic. But deep down I knew. Walking into the house, it was too quiet, the kind of silence that screamed something's wrong. And then I heard it, the sounds, those unmistakable sounds coming from our bedroom. My steps felt like lead, each one heavier than the last. I reached the bedroom door, and there it was, the scene that shattered my world. My wife with our supervisor in our bed in the home we built together. I stood there, frozen, as everything inside me crumbled. It's funny how in moments like that, time seems to both stop and race. A million thoughts crashed through my mind. Anger, pain, disbelief. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I couldn't move. I was just broken. Finally, I managed to tear myself away. I stumbled out of the house, got into my car and just drove. I had no destination, no plan. Streets and buildings blurred past me as I drove aimlessly, trying to outrun the pain. But you can't outrun something that's inside you. I found myself on this old country road, far from the city, far from everything. And that's when it hit me. I just broke down right there, alone in my car. Tears, man, I hadn't cried like that since I was a kid. But it was like a dam had burst inside me. All the hurt, the betrayal, it just poured out. The rest of the day was a blur. I don't even remember how I got back home. But when I did, they were gone. The house felt so empty, like a shell. I wandered from room to room, trying to make sense of it all. But there was no sense to be made. Just a deep, aching void where my trust and love used to be. I ended up in our living room, surrounded by all these memories, photos of us on the wall, souvenirs from trips we took, gifts we gave each other. It all felt like a lie now. I felt like a fool for believing, for hoping, for loving. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the dark, replaying it all over in my head. The signs were there, I guess. Maybe I just chose to ignore them. Or maybe I was too scared to face the truth. But there it was, stark and undeniable. That Friday changed everything. It was the day my marriage, the life I thought I had, all of it just shattered. And I was left to pick up the pieces, not even sure where to start or if it was even worth the effort. Walking back into that house after what I'd seen felt like stepping into a battlefield. Everything was a reminder of the betrayal. The pictures on the walls mocked me, the silence screamed at me. She wasn't there when I first got back. Maybe that was for the best. When she did show up, she tried to act like it was all a big misunderstanding. Can you believe that? As if I hadn't seen what I'd seen with my own eyes. Her words were empty, just noise without meaning. My heart, once full of love for her, was now just a pit of anger and hurt. I couldn't contain it. I was like a storm, raging through the house. I smashed a vase we'd picked out together on one of our trips. I tore down the photos, each one a stab in the heart. The place we'd called home was now just a cage of memories, each one a bitter reminder of what I'd lost. Then came Monday back at work. Seeing him, the supervisor, sitting there like nothing had happened, it was too much. I saw red. Before I knew it, I was on him, fists flying. I didn't care about the consequences, didn't care about anything. All the pent-up rage, the feeling of being made a fool, it all just exploded. Of course, that was the end of my job. They escorted me out, and I left without a word. It didn't matter. What was a job compared to your whole life falling apart? The drive home was a blur. I was numb, detached from everything and everyone. The following days were a mix of rage and emptiness. I moved like a ghost through the house, through life. Everything I built, everything I believed in, it felt like a lie. I was a stranger in my own life. She was still there in the house. We avoided each other, two strangers under the same roof. When we did cross paths, it was like navigating a minefield, each word, each glance loaded with unspoken accusations and pain. I remember one night sitting in the dark, the silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight. I thought about everything we'd been through, all the promises we'd made. And for what? To end up like this, broken, betrayed, alone in the dark. But anger, it's a funny thing. It burns hot and fierce, but it can't last forever. Slowly it started to fade, leaving behind a deep, aching sadness. I started to see things more clearly, started to accept the reality of what had happened. The reality was our marriage was over. The trust, once broken, couldn't be mended. The love, once so bright, had faded into nothing. It was time to face that, time to start thinking about what came next. But moving on, it's not like flipping a switch. You don't just wake up one day and everything's fine. It's a process, a slow, painful crawl out of the darkness. And I was just at the beginning. Filing for divorce felt like admitting defeat. It was waving the white flag after years of battling for a marriage that, in the end, couldn't be saved. The paperwork, the legalities, it was all just a formality. A cold, bureaucratic process for something that once held so much warmth and love. But the real kicker? We were still living in the same house, a situation that was nothing short of a daily torture. The place that once echoed with our laughter now resounded with the heavy silence of our broken relationship. I'd see her around, sometimes catching a glimpse of her getting ready for a date, and it felt like being punched in the gut every single time. She wasn't discreet about her new flings. I'd hear her laughing on the phone, or she'd come home late, that look on her face that I used to think was reserved just for me. It was a constant stinging reminder of how far we'd fallen, of everything that we'd lost. The house, once our sanctuary, had become a prison of memories. Every room, every piece of furniture, held a story, a moment from our past. I'd sit in our living room, staring at the empty chair where she used to curl up with a book, and feel this overwhelming sense of loss. Trying to find a new place was a battle in itself. My finances were a mess after losing the job, and the market wasn't kind. It was this endless loop of viewings and applications, each rejection a small echo of the bigger rejection I was already grappling with. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The divorce proceedings seemed to drag on forever. It was a maze of legal terms, meetings with lawyers, and endless paperwork. Each signature felt like signing off a part of myself, a part of a life that I was still struggling to let go of. I'd come home to an empty house, or worse, to the sounds of her entertaining someone in what used to be our bedroom. The walls of that house felt like they were closing in on me, a constant, suffocating reminder of my failure. It wasn't just the loss of the marriage, but the loss of myself. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back. Where there used to be ambition and laughter, There was now just this hollow emptiness. My friends tried to be supportive, but there's only so much they could do. They'd invite me out, try to distract me, but it was like I was there in body but not in spirit. I was living in this fog, going through the motions of life without really living. As the divorce inched closer to being final, I found myself grappling with a mix of emotions. Relief that it was almost over, sadness for what had been lost, and a deep, knowing fear of what the future held. It was during those long, lonely nights in that house, listening to the silence or the sounds of her life moving on without me, that I realized this was the end of a chapter. A painful, heart-wrenching chapter, but just a chapter nonetheless. There was still the rest of my story to be written, even if I couldn't see how just yet. The day I moved out felt like the end of a long, grueling marathon. The divorce was inked and dried, the last of our shared belongings awkwardly split. Stepping out of that house for the last time, I couldn't help but feel this strange mix of relief and overwhelming sadness. I found a small apartment, nothing fancy, just a place to start over. The walls were bare, the rooms echoed with emptiness, kind of like how I felt inside. Unpacking was a trip down memory lane. Each item a reminder of a life that was no longer mine. It was surreal setting up this new place, a home that was just mine, not ours. The first few nights were the hardest. The silence was deafening. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, the events of the past years replaying in my mind. The laughter, the tears, the betrayal, it all seemed like a dream. A bad one that I couldn't wake up from. Becoming a single man again after all those years was a strange transition. There were no more arguments, no more painful silences, but also no more shared smiles, no more quiet moments of intimacy. I found myself missing even the bad parts simply because they were familiar. I tried to throw myself into work, into rebuilding a life, but it was like learning to walk again. I'd lost not just a wife but a part of my identity. Who was I if not her husband? It was a question that haunted me. The bitterness was hard to shake off. I became more cynical, more guarded. Trusting someone again felt like an impossible task. I'd look at couples and feel this pang of something, envy, sadness, maybe a bit of both. Friends and family were supportive, encouraging me to get back out there, but they didn't understand. It wasn't just about finding someone new. It was about healing, about figuring out how to trust and love again after it had all been shattered. In quieter moments, I'd reflect on everything that had happened. Sure, there were signs I should have seen, moments when I should have walked away. But life isn't lived in hindsight. We make the best decisions we can with the information we have at the time. Now it's about rebuilding, but it's slow going. Some days I feel like I'm making progress, finding pieces of the old me, the one who believed in love and happiness. Other days it's like I'm stuck, unable to move forward, caught in the memories of what was. The hardest part is accepting that the reflection in the mirror has changed. I'm not the same man I was when I walked down that aisle. The experiences, the pain, the betrayal, it's all etched into who I am now. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Maybe this new version of me will be wiser, stronger, more resilient. So here I am, standing at the start of a new chapter in my life. The road ahead is uncertain, maybe a little scary, but it's mine to walk. And who knows, maybe along the way I'll find pieces of happiness, moments of peace, and perhaps, eventually, a reflection I can recognize and be proud of again.